tycoon's furious shout cut through the elegant dining room like a blade, instantly silencing every hushed conversation. "Get rid of her right this second," he thundered, his finger stabbing the air toward a trembling young waitress. "If she's still employed when I return, I'll personally ensure this establishment never sees another cent of my money." The young woman clutched her order pad, her knuckles white, as 100 judgmental eyes bored into her. Most would have stammered an apology or fled in tears. Instead, she locked eyes with the furious billionaire and delivered a reply that wiped the arrogance from his face. "Go on, then," she said, her voice remarkably steady. "Fire me if that's what you want." But who was this unflinching server, and what secret was she about to unleash that would shatter the world of the man who demanded her job? The warm glow of crystal chandeliers danced across pristine marble floors as a gentle melody floated through the air. This was the city's most exclusive dining establishment, a haven for the powerful to conduct business and celebrate victories. Every surface gleamed, every detail was curated to perfection. For the staff, excellence was the only acceptable standard. Yet tonight, an undercurrent of anxiety ran beneath the surface. Near the entrance, the restaurant manager hurried in from the street, his face ashen. "He's arrived," he breathed to the assembled team. The name that followed sent a collective chill through the room. "Victor Sterling." Waiters exchanged nervous glances, and a young busboy muttered a curse under his breath. Why did this one man's presence cause such fear? Victor Sterling was a name that commanded respect and terror in equal measure. At 38, he had constructed a technological empire that dominated the nation. His fortune was legendary, his reach unparalleled. The press hailed him as a visionary. Fellow moguls envied his acumen. Aspiring entrepreneurs sought to emulate his path. But those who worked in the establishments he frequented knew the man behind the myth, a cold, exacting personality with a temper that could ignite over the slightest imperfection. A single misstep could end a career. The manager clapped his hands for attention. "Table 7, as always, everything must be flawless. No delays, no excuses." A young waitress let out a shaky sigh. "Remember last time? He exploded at Marco over the wine selection," a busboy whispered. "And it wasn't even Marco's fault," another added grimly. "It doesn't matter," a senior waiter muttered. "When Victor Sterling is displeased, someone always pays the price." Manager scanned the room. "Who's taking table 7? Silence. Every employee suddenly found their shoes, their trays, their napkins fascinating. No one would meet his gaze. He exhaled, exasperated. "Come on, someone has to do it." A calm voice from the back broke the tension. "I'll take it." All eyes turned. Mia Chen, the newest hire, stood by the service station. She had only been there a few weeks, but unlike her colleagues, she wasn't trembling. She simply tied her apron tighter and stepped forward. The manager frowned, concerned. "Mia, are you sure?" She gave a small, confident nod. "A customer is a customer, it's what we're paid for." A senior waiter shook his head. "You don't get it. Victor Sterling isn't a normal customer." Mia raised an eyebrow. "What does he do, growl?" A few nervous chuckles broke the tension, but the manager hesitated before nodding. "All right, but be on your guard." The grand doors swung open, and a tall, imposing figure strode in. Victor Sterling, in a flawlessly tailored dark suit, exuded an aura of impatient power. His security detail melted into the background as he moved with purpose toward his usual table, barely acknowledging the room around him. Staff instinctively stepped aside. He sat, immediately pulling out his phone, his attention already elsewhere. The manager leaned close to Mia. "Polite, quick, and no matter what, keep your cool." She gave a small nod, picked up her notepad, and walked toward the lion's den. Her footsteps seemed to echo in the silent room as her coworkers watched. She stopped beside the table. "Good evening, sir. My name is Mia, and I'll be your server tonight." Sterling barely glanced up from his phone. "Water," he said flatly, "sparkling, and be quick about it." "Of course," she replied with a practiced smile. She returned swiftly with the water and stood patiently as he continued typing. Finally, he looked up. "I'll have the sea bass," he said. "Grilled, medium, with seasonal vegetables, no sauce." She jotted it down. "Anything else?" He gave her a lingering, appraising look, then waved her away. "That's all." "Very well," she said, turning back toward the kitchen. Immediately, the other staff crowded her. "Well," a waitress hissed. "Did he blow up?" Mia shook her head. "He just ordered dinner." The skeptical waiter from earlier muttered, "Just wait." In the kitchen, chefs prepared the order with extreme caution, aware of the diner's reputation. Minutes later, Mia carried the plate to table 7. "Your grilled sea bass, sir." Sterling nodded without looking up, but just as she turned to leave, he froze, his eyes narrowing at the plate. Slowly, he set his fork down with a deliberate clink. "Miss," he said, his voice turning to ice. She turned back. "This isn't what I ordered." The atmosphere in the restaurant shattered. Nearby patrons looked up. The manager's heart seized. The watching staff prayed silently. The calm was over. Sterling pushed the plate forward. "This is not what I ordered." His voice was quiet but laced with dangerous irritation. Conversations around them faded to whispers. Mia remained poised. "I apologize, sir. What seems to be the issue?" He pointed at the fish with his fork. "I asked for medium. This is overdone." Mia glanced at the dish. It appeared perfectly cooked to her, but she knew better than to argue. "My apologies. I can have the kitchen prepare a fresh one immediately." Sterling leaned back, studying her with unnerving intensity. "That's not the point," he said, his voice rising. "When I give an instruction, I expect it to be followed correctly the first time." The manager hurried over, forcing a smile. "Mr. Sterling, my sincerest apologies. We'll fix this at once." Sterling ignored him, his focus locked on Mia. "Is she new?" he asked. The manager hesitated. "She just started a few weeks ago." "That explains it," Sterling muttered. Mia felt the stares from across the room. She knew what they expected, cowering apologies, but his condescension sparked a quiet defiance. She had done her job correctly. The chef had inspected the plate. Still, she kept her voice respectful. "I can replace the dish immediately, sir." Sterling slammed his fork down with a sharp clang that made several patrons jump. "I don't want it replaced," he snapped. The manager paled. "This is exactly the problem with places like this," Sterling continued, his voice dripping with contempt. "Careless staff who don't pay attention." Mia took a slow, steadying breath. "With respect, sir, I only delivered what the kitchen prepared." Sterling's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Are you talking back to me?" "No," she replied evenly. "I'm explaining the situation." The manager stepped in, desperate. "Mia, please, just apologize." But Mia stood her ground. Something in Sterling's expression shifted from anger to a cold amusement. "You have nerve," he said slowly. Then his face hardened again. "But nerve doesn't excuse incompetence." The manager stammered. "Mr. Sterling, I assure you, we'll—" Sterling cut him off. "Fire her." The words landed like a grenade. The manager was speechless. "I what?" "You heard me," Sterling said, his voice final. "I don't want someone like this serving me or anyone else in this establishment." The restaurant was now a silent tableau of shock. The manager squirmed. "Mr. Sterling, that might be a bit extreme. The fault might not have been hers." Sterling's gaze was icy. "Are you questioning my judgment?" "No, sir, but—" "I spend a fortune here," Sterling interrupted. "When I say an employee shouldn't be here, I expect my wishes to be respected." The manager's resolve crumbled. He turned to Mia, uncomfortable. "Mia, maybe you should take a break." But Mia didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on Sterling, and now there was something more than anger in them, something personal and deep. Sterling noticed. "What?" he demanded impatiently. Mia spoke, her voice carrying across the silent room. "You really don't recognize me, do you?" Sterling frowned. "Why would I recognize a waitress?" She gave a short, incredulous laugh. "It's funny," she said, her voice steady but intense. "I never thought the first time I met my father he'd be trying to get me fired." The silence that followed was deafening. The manager's jaw dropped. A customer gasped. Sterling stared at her as if she'd spoken in a foreign language. "What did you just say?" Mia didn't flinch. "I said I never thought my own father would try to get me fired." Sterling let out a sharp, dismissive laugh. "That's absurd. I don't have children." Mia's expression was unreadable. "Are you certain?" His smile faded. He studied her face, her eyes, the set of her jaw, and something stirred in his memory. A flicker of familiarity that made his skin prickle. "This is either a case of mistaken identity," he said, "or a very ill-advised stunt." Mia reached under her uniform collar and pulled out a thin chain. A small, distinctive silver locket dangled from it. Sterling's breath caught. He knew that locket. He had given it to someone 2 decades ago, someone who vanished from his life. "My mother's name is Lin Chen," Mia said calmly. The name was a physical blow. Sterling felt the room spin. The noise, the people, everything faded as buried memories crashed back. Lin Chen, the girl he'd loved, the one who left without a trace. And now this young woman stood before him, wearing his gift, claiming to be his daughter. For a long, agonizing moment, Victor Sterling didn't move. The restaurant sounds returned, murmurs, the clink of glass, the hum of conversation, but it all felt distant. His eyes were locked on the small silver locket. He remembered that summer night, the music, her smile. He had clasped that locket around the neck of the girl he thought he'd spend his life with. Lin Chen. Sterling slowly rose from his chair. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice suddenly rough. Mia held his gaze. "Mother saved it." Sterling shook his head, still staring. "That's impossible." "Is it?" she replied quietly. The manager looked between them, bewildered. "Mr. Sterling, is everything all right?" Sterling waved him off, his attention fully on Mia. Now that he looked closely, the resemblance was undeniable. Her eyes, the shape of her face, the quiet strength in her posture, it was like seeing a ghost. "What did you say your mother's name was?" he asked again, needing to hear it. "Lin Chen," she said firmly. Lin Chen. The name echoed in his mind. He remembered everything now. Their final year of high school, inseparable for 2 years. She was his anchor, his calm in the storm of his ambition. Until one day she vanished. No word, no explanation. He searched for a while, then buried the pain in work, building the empire that made him famous. And now, 2 decades later, she was standing in front of him through her daughter. "No," he muttered. "Lin would have told me." Mia's expression hardened. "She tried." Sterling looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" Mia took a breath, the emotion barely contained. "When she found out she was pregnant, she went to your family's house." The words hit him like a physical blow. "She waited outside for almost an hour," Mia continued. "Finally, someone came out to speak with her." Sterling's voice was strained. "Who? Your father?" A chill ran down Sterling's spine. His father, a man obsessed with image and legacy. "What did he say?" Sterling asked, dreading the answer. Mia's eyes glinted with old pain. "He told her she wasn't welcome, that if she tried to trap you with a story about a baby, he would make her life a living hell." Sterling felt the blood drain from his face. "My father wouldn't have." "He did," Mia cut him off, her voice firm. "She was 18. She was terrified. She had no one." Sterling ran a hand through his hair, his composure cracking. "If this is true, she waited for you to come home," Mia added softly. "But your father told her you didn't want to see her. That you chosen your future." Sterling's fists clenched. 20 years he'd believed she'd abandoned him. "What happened after that?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Mia looked down for a moment. "She left town. I was born a few months later." Sterling sank back into his chair, his legs unable to support him. "She raised you alone," Mia nodded. "She worked 3 jobs most of the time, cleaning houses, diners, whatever it took. She didn't just raise me. She built a life from nothing, while you were building a fortune." He felt a crushing weight of guilt. "She never tried to contact me again." "She believed your father," Mia said. "She thought you rejected her, that you chose your empire over her." Sterling closed his eyes, the pain of that lie searing through him. When he opened them, he looked at her with a vulnerability he'd never shown the world. "I looked for her," he said defensively. "For how long?" Mia asked. He couldn't answer. The truth was, his ambition had consumed him. The search had ended quickly. "Not long enough," he finally admitted. Mia studied him, her expression unreadable. "So what now?" she asked quietly. Sterling looked at the locket, then at her. "I need to see her." Mia's eyes widened slightly. "Why?" "Because I need to know the truth," he said. "Because," he paused, the words catching, "she shouldn't have done it alone." Mia crossed her arms. "You humiliated me tonight, you tried to destroy my job, and now you want to be a father," Sterling winced. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he admitted. "I don't deserve it." The honesty seemed to take her aback. "But if Lynn raised my child because of a lie my family told, then I owe both of you more than an apology. I owe you the truth." Mia was silent for a moment. Then she said, "My mom is sick." Sterling went still. "What?" "She's been sick for a while," Mia said. "The treatment is expensive." Sterling's mind raced. "Take me to her." Mia searched his face, looking for deception. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious in my life." Finally, she gave a slow nod. "Finish your dinner." Sterling blinked. "What?" A faint, ironic smile touched her lips. "You're still a customer, Mr. Sterling." For the first time that night, the tension between them cracked, revealing something fragile and new. The drive across the city was a blur of neon lights and quiet streets. Victor Sterling sat in the back of his town car, staring out at the glittering skyline that slowly gave way to modest apartments and older neighborhoods. Mia sat beside him, silent, watching the world pass. His mind was a storm. 20 years of unanswered questions. A daughter he never knew. A love he'd lost to a lie. He glanced at Mia. Now that he knew, the resemblance was unmistakable. the same fire in her eyes that Lynn had. "Here," Mia said softly. The car pulled up to a modest, aging building. Faded paint, iron railings a world away from his penthouses. Sterling stared at it, a knot forming in his throat. "She lives here," Mia nodded. "For the last 8 years." He thought of his sprawling estates, his unused properties. She had been here. The car stopped. They got out. The hallway smelled of cleaning fluid and old wood. Mia climbed the stairs slowly, Sterling following, each step heavier than the last. At the 3rd floor, she stopped in front of a door. She hesitated. Sterling noticed. "What is it?" She looked at him. "She doesn't know you're coming," he swallowed. "Probably for the best." Mia knocked gently. Footsteps approached. The door opened, and there she was, Lynn Chen. Time had marked her, silver in her hair, lines of weariness around her eyes, but she was unmistakably the girl he'd loved. Her eyes were the same. First, she saw Mia. "Sweetheart, you're late," she said softly. Then her gaze shifted to the man behind her daughter. Her face went pale, her breath caught. For a moment she simply stared, as if seeing a ghost. "Victor," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "Hello, Lynn." Mia stepped aside, leaving them facing each other. 20 years of distance filled the silence. "How?" Lynn finally asked, her voice trembling. "How are you here?" Sterling looked at Mia. "She found me." Lynn looked at her daughter, confusion and shock mingling. "What?" Mia smiled faintly. "Long story." Lynn looked back at Victor, her eyes searching. "After all this time," Victor took a tentative step forward. "I didn't know," he said. Lynn frowned. "Know what?" "About the baby," he said, the words heavy. "Your father told me you didn't want to see me," Lynn said, her voice cracking. Victor shook his head, his own eyes glistening. "He told me you left, that you moved on." The truth hung between them, a terrible, simple misunderstanding that had shaped 2 lives. Lynn let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for 20 years. "I thought you abandoned us." "I thought you abandoned me," Victor replied. They stared at each other, 2 people finally seeing the truth behind the lie. Lynn looked at Mia, then back at Victor, a sad, weary smile on her face. "She has your stubbornness." Victor's voice was thick with emotion. "She has your strength." Mia leaned against the doorframe, watching the reunion of the parents she'd only heard about in stories. Finally, Lynn stepped aside, her hand trembling on the door. "You should come in," she said softly. Victor stepped into the small apartment. It was simple, warm, filled with photos of Mia growing up, birthdays, school events, graduations, moments he had missed. He felt a wave of grief for what he'd lost and a spark of hope for what might still be found. Lynn closed the door behind them. The 3 of them stood together in the small, quiet space, an unfinished family, but no longer strangers. And for the first time in 2 decades, the story of Victor, Lynn, and Mia was no longer a tale of loss, but of a second chance. The small apartment seemed to hold its breath. Victor stood by the window, gazing out at the city lights, the same lights he'd seen from his towers, but tonight they looked different. Behind him, Lynn sat on the worn sofa and Mia leaned against the wall. Finally, Lynn broke the silence. "So," she said, a hint of her old humor returning, "you're really one of the richest men in the country now." Victor gave a small, self-conscious smile. "Apparently." Lynn studied him. "You always said you'd build something big." Victor looked down. "I did," but he hesitated, then met her eyes. "I didn't come looking for you again." Lynn shook her head slowly. "I waited for you for a long time, Victor." The weight of those words pressed down on him. "I told myself you moved on, that maybe you didn't want to be found." Lynn's eyes were sad but understanding. "I was too proud to try again after what your father did." Victor turned to Mia. "I owe you an apology." Mia raised an eyebrow. "For yelling at me in the restaurant?" He managed a small, rueful smile. "That too, but mostly for missing 20 years of your life." Mia glanced at the photos on the shelf, her childhood, her accomplishments, then back at him. "You can't change the past," she said. "No, but I can decide what I do next." Lynn watched him carefully. "And what is it you want to do?" Victor took a deep breath. "I want to help with everything." Lynn's expression hardened slightly. "We're not looking for charity." "I know that," he said quickly. "That's not what I'm offering." He looked from Lynn to Mia. "Mia is my daughter. I want to be part of her life if you'll let me." Mia crossed her arms. "That's going to take time." Victor nodded. "I'm not expecting miracles." He looked at Lynn again. "And you shouldn't have to face your health alone." Lynn looked surprised. "You told him?" she asked Mia. Mia nodded. Victor spoke up. "I've already arranged for a specialist to see you tomorrow, one of the best in the country." Lynn's eyes widened. "Victor, that must cost a fortune." He shook his head gently. "It doesn't matter." For a moment, Lynn looked like she might refuse, but then she saw the sincerity in his eyes, the same sincerity she'd seen in the boy who gave her that locket. Her expression softened. "Maybe," she said quietly. "People really can change." Victor smiled faintly. "I'm hopping so." Mia looked between them, a wry smile finally breaking through. "This is still really weird." Victor let out a quiet laugh. "Tell me about it." For the first time, the tension in the room eased, replaced by something tentative but real. Later, as Victor stood by the door to leave, he turned back. "I'll be here in the morning," he said. Mia nodded. Lynn walked him to the door. They stood in the doorway, the years between them finally beginning to close. "Thank you for coming," Lynn said softly. Victor shook his head. "No, thank her." He nodded toward Mia, who was watching them from the living room. Lynn followed his gaze, a proud smile touching her lips. "She's stubborn." Victor smiled too, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "She gets that from you." Lynn laughed quietly, a sound Victor hadn't heard in 2 decades. It was like a melody he'd forgotten he knew. As he stepped into the hallway, Victor paused. The billionaire who had conquered industries finally understood something he'd been missing his entire life. Success wasn't measured in dollars or deals. It was measured in the people who would stand by you when everything else fell away. And now, after 20 lost years, he finally had the chance to build the only thing that had ever truly mattered: a family. If this story moved you, show your support by giving this video a like and subscribing to Winds of Thought. We bring you tales of redemption, family, and the twists of fate that change everything.